Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Alethea O'Hara Stevenson, and before we get started, I'd like to officially start the meeting at 6:02 p.m. I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and the Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. Given the fact that this is the month of June and the Sunday is National Indigenous Peoples Day, I'd like to also take time out to recognize and celebrate the unique heritage and diverse cultures and outstanding contributions of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Coincidentally, today as well is Juneteenth, being celebrated by our neighbors to the south in the States. And it is recognizing the anniversary of the emancipation of the enslaved in the US and a celebration of the American freedom and achievements of African Americans in the States. Right here at home, I'd like to take the time to recognize and celebrate Black Canadians who have paved the way for us to be here today and who have contributed significantly to the mosaic of not just Dufferin County, but of Canada as a whole. So that's it for land acknowledgement. Thank you everyone again for joining us, and welcome to our very first task force meeting. At this point, we do have a few housekeeping items to go over. I'd like to let you know that this meeting is being recorded, and all of our meetings going forward will be recorded and shared on the town website. To kick things off, I'd like to open it up to our Deputy Mayor Anderson, to say a few words and get started.
Thank you very much, Alethea. Just to add to what Alethea said, it will be shared on our website and it'll also be viewed on YouTube as well. Before I get into my opening remarks, it's important that I start off with, unfortunately, an apology. And I was premature in my remarks to the media with respect to the timeline that I would hope to get recommendations back to council for consideration. I had mentioned 2 months, and a lot of people had picked up on that. And upon reflection, I realized that 2 months would likely be premature, considering the studies that we have to do. And I think all of us believe that because the work is so important, that we should ensure that we're taking our time to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to come back with recommendations in December. What I'm hoping for rather is that we have the opportunity to make recommendations to council by latest the end of August or the first week of September. And if you're wondering, well, why do we need to extend it that long? Is because, first of all, we're going to have to do some training, some board training. We're going to have somebody who's going to come in and provide specific training when it comes to anti-Black racism, discrimination or systemic discrimination, etc. So that will be lined up soon. Alethea will speak to that at some point. We're also going to have to engage the public in a very meaningful way and give them an opportunity to participate. So whether that is via a survey, via a delegation before the task force, which a number of our stakeholders have already reached out to myself and Alethea wanting to do that, and or pre-recorded videos. So we just want to make sure that there's a thorough opportunity for that to occur. Then of course, we're going to have to digest that information and then make recommendations to council. So that's the timeline. I'm hoping that with that being provided to everyone today, that no one feels that they can't commit, but certainly if they cannot, based on the comments that I made previously, then I would ask that you mention it or speak to the chair about it, but I'm hoping that everybody here is able to see their way to the end. I want to start off, of course, moving past that to congratulate Alethea on being appointed as the chair. Clearly, council has the utmost confidence in you to lead out with this team. And we are confident and certain that with the support of the rest of the task force, that not only you, but the task force itself will do extremely well. Some of you may be asking, if not all, well, why were you chosen? Well, let me just answer that question right now. The reason why each and every one of you were chosen is because you have a track record of getting things done. And when we're talking about the magnitude of the work that we have to do, we don't need a room full of talkers, we need a room full of doers. And so we carefully thought out the individuals, looked at and examined carefully each and every person and the work that they have done. Again, taking action in a time where we need certain action. And that's why each and every one of you are here today. And, Wade and I, and I'm sure Wade would echo these sentiments on behalf of council as well, that with the team that we have no doubt that we are going to accomplish what we set out to accomplish. Let me state the obvious, that the work is important. It's very serious. And I think if you didn't know, you certainly probably would have learned over the last few days, a lot of people have their eyes on this task force. We were one of the first to lead out with such a task force. Many others are following suit, but there are a lot of eyeballs on this task force, good and bad. And so there's no question in our minds, or at least in my mind, that we have to deliver on the commitments that Wade and I and council said that we're going to deliver on. So we're certainly counting on you guys to do the heavy lifting. Wade and I, just to be clear with respect to our roles, are here to oversee the work of the task force. The discussions and the main discussions will be had by you and that of the stakeholders and the members of the public, where we will be listening and be adopting at the very end. So those are my opening remarks. I thank you, Alicia, for giving me the opportunity to do that. And I look forward to working with everyone as we see this thing through. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Anderson. And it's a perfect segue into putting the notice out that we will need to have a vice chair appointed and a secretary appointed. So this is kind of urgent. We need to have your, votes in tonight. Most importantly, we need to have a secretary appointed so that we can move forward with the rest of the meeting and have some notes taken to be shared with the town clerk. Oh my gosh. So without further delay, does anyone have any interest in raising their hand to be vice chair?
And just before anybody comments, this is for those who have served on boards before, and I'm sure many of you have, we're doing this pursuant to our terms of reference, where we have to, normally there would be, in some committees, there would be a selection of the chair. Once the committee starts, the chair was appointed in this situation for those who don't have the experience. And so pursuant to the bylaws in terms of reference, this is something that we have to do in order to move forward as a task force. So what we're asking for today is, as Alethea said, who are interested in the position to state that we are interested in the position. If there is more than one person that is interested in the position, each person will have an opportunity to convey to the group as to why they believe that that position should be, why they want to serve in that position, and then ultimately a vote will be casted, and then we'll move forward.
What about nominations?
Sorry?
What about nominations? Can we nominate people?
You can. That's one way of doing it. The reason why I would discourage that for the purposes of today is because you could nominate somebody who may not simply want to do it. And so to me, it would be more efficient for those who clearly want to do it to simply just state so. And then again, if there's more than one person who would like to do the position, we'll give each and every individual an opportunity in their case, and then at the end, the vote will be casted.
So I heard one person speak up for the role of vice chair. Is there anyone else that would be interested in stepping up? Going once, going twice? No? Okay, so we have Althea Castamento who has raised her hand. Do we have someone that will approve that?
So at the end, what we'll do is we will accept, we'll bring there has to be a resolution that will be given to council. So she's put her name forward. There will be a vote to accept her nomination for the vice chair. And then once that is voted upon, that resolution will be provided to the town clerk, and our social media and our print and whatever we do will be updated with that information as well.
Okay, perfect. So we had Simran who first that, and do I have a second? Perfect, Gare.
Is there anybody have any discussion? Anybody want to make any comments before we take a vote to accept the nomination? Nobody? Okay, if we could just raise our hands affirming the appointment of the vice chair. Okay,
Perfect.
so that's carried.
And now it's the call for secretary. Do I have someone who would be interested in raising their hand?
Can I ask a question first, Althea?
Absolutely.
Is this I don't want the job. I'm not speaking on behalf of that. But the secretary of a committee it can be like a real job in which their job is to do quite a bit of secretarial work for the committee, or it can be just a symbolic part of the committee. As Wade and Steve have outlined the work ahead, I'm wondering if this is something that we should have some assistance from the council, that there is actually a clerical kind of person that does the hands-on secretarial work for this committee, so that the secretary that we're speaking of now is more of not a formality, but it's not a real job, if you will. Any comments, Steve, on that?
Sure. So I was going over the terms of reference in the bylaw today, and my reading of that, Ken, is that if a staff member is to be a part of the committee or task force, they are not to be the secretary of the committee or the task force. Now, that doesn't mean that there could be a resolution put forward by the board for council to consider that. There's that opportunity, so I wouldn't remove that away from the task force to suggest that to council, but that's my current understanding of how it works.
So just to poke at a few resources, then the town could provide us resources to do the heavy lifting of the real secretarial work, if you will.
Yeah. So just on that point, I did speak to Carol Maitland. So as we talk about some of the work that we have to do by way of survey, marketing, etc., my initial thoughts was that Carol Maitland would be involved in really assisting us quite greatly in that work. That itself has to go before council, and I will be doing that on Monday to ensure that we have her available to do that. But I was, again, with respect to having somebody designated to take the notes or provide that sort of secretarial assistance, if it's the will of the task force by way of resolution that I bring that to council for consideration.
Well, thank you very much. That's a good explanation.
So based on the learnings from this conversation, does it make sense to have this brought forward as a request to council, or do we proceed with having someone document or meeting minutes going forward?
Well, I think that we should go ahead with the appointment of the secretary for the purposes of even this meeting itself.
Right.
Notes. We could still do the appointment and then make the recommendation to council, again, if that's the will of the task force. But I still believe that we should move forward with that selection.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
Any volunteers for the role of secretary?
So again, the role of secretary is to obviously take the meeting notes of the meeting. You'll be corresponding with the town clerk, who is Jennifer, providing her with the minutes, which is required by the terms of reference bylaw. There might be some other information with respect to meeting dates, but I think that could be handled by the chair. So the main role of the secretary, again, is to basically take notes of each meeting that we have. So again, it's a crucial role because we can't function certainly without it. And so I'm hoping that somebody is prepared to step up and take on that challenge.
I can take it on.
Thanks, dear.
Thank you, Gare. Do we have someone to approve that?
I'll move that.
Thank you.
I'll gladly move it.
Excellent, thank you. Does
That was
anyone
seconded
have? Sorry, first by
I'll second that.
Okay, and second by Simran. Does anyone have any comments, concerns? All in favor of Gare being appointed secretary? Show of hands. Perfect. So this is now settled.
Lisa, just before you go forward with your next item, just very briefly, I certainly want to give each and every one of you an opportunity. If you have any questions, this is new for many of us, if not all of us. And so if there are any questions that you have of me, I know Alethea at some point will be talking about roles and expectations, but certainly if you have any questions, feel free to ask, whether now or certainly at the end of the meeting, okay?
Perfect, thank you, Steve. So in terms of roles and expectations, guaranteed we will have disagreements in this meeting. It's supposed to be a safe space, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. If we're going out in the public, we're going out as one voice, one unified voice as the task force. And the whole point of having this committee is we will have diverse ideas, we will have diverse opinions, and it's for us to be able to discuss it in a safe environment where we can share, we can grow, we can learn, and come up with a solution that is to the benefit of all of our community. So that is my biggest concern with having this group, just making sure that we're all on the same page and we're all singing from the same song sheet, okay? I do expect everyone to have—
Comment on.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you completely. Great suggestion. In a lot of formal situations, such as the town council or some certain boards, only the CEO or the chair or the vice chair have the opportunity to do that, to speak for the group. So I think in this case, if the others agree, you should be speaking for this group. And then anything further than that would need to come to the town council, because we are a task force or a committee of council. Steve, is that okay, or does it need to come through town council first?
No, I think amongst the task force, I think that's appropriate. And as you know, Ken, and I'm sure everybody else, that's standard, that the chair or the, well, obviously, but that the chair is responsible for communicating the voice and the will of the group. So I think that's totally appropriate.
Great, thanks.
Okay, perfect. I lost my train of thought, but I'll move on. So the other piece of the meeting, I'm going to have to switch the agenda a little bit just so that we can focus on some key items. I added a new item, which is called request for funding. That was not sent out in the original invite. And ideally, what I would like for us to do is to agree upon an amount that we will then put forward to council. In order for us to operate and to be successful, we will need to have marketing material. We will need to have information going out there into the public. We will need some kind of training in terms of diversity and inclusion. So what I am proposing is that we put something in front of council requesting up to $15,000 for them to approve a budget for us to operate for the duration of this task force. So does anyone have any comments, concerns around that? And do I have someone who will approve that?
I will definitely approve that, and I think that that is very important for us to get our information out there.
Excellent, thank you. And do I have someone to second that?
Do comments come now or after?
It would be after it's seconded, and then there'll be opportunity for a discussion.
I'll second that.
Okay, and I have comments from Gare.
Yeah. What was the thought around the need for the funds, particularly if we might be utilizing some of the town's resources around the website or survey or something like that, or the various means that would be communicating with the public?
So, for example, if we wanted to put out an advertisement with a newspaper to let them know what our mandate is all about, to solicit the public for input, for feedback, we will need funding for that. If we talk about doing a survey, we will need funding resources around putting together a survey and having that published. Likewise, for us to be efficient and effective in our role, we will need some type of D&I training so that we can best serve not just the task force, but our community. So that was some of the thoughts around why we need funding. Yes, Simran?
I definitely agree with that.
I just had like related to that, like as you said, just as an example, that you said if we have to put an ad or something, some material in the newspapers, would we be going to these newspapers or to these outlets independently as a task force, or would we still be going through the town? Because of course they have some discounted rates available for the town specifically because they do that on an ongoing basis. So how exactly would it look like?
Yeah, and I could speak to that, Alethea.
Perfect.
So to answer Gear's original question about the need, and Alethea hit the nail on the head with respect to a number of the items. I did speak to Carol Maitland with respect to what some of these costs would be and what we would need funding for. And as she pointed out, whether it's an ad in the Shelburne Free Press, we talked about maybe doing an ad on Country 105, for example. To your question, Simran, that would be done through the town and through the help of Carol Maitland and the connections and the resources that she has. So the task force wouldn't be expected to go independently to go and do that. We would get the assistance, hopefully, from Carol Maitland and her expertise, not only when it comes to the surveys, but putting the information out. And I should add that when it came to, for example, getting community engagement for Fiddle Park or for the OPP, there was a survey that was put out through Bang the Table. There were a number of ads that were put out. And in speaking with Carol, she had told me that it was quite successful because we were able to get the information out on these various channels. We may also want to consider, depending on the demographic that we want to reach as well, whether we're doing Instagram ads or Facebook ads to ensure that our youth demographic is being reached as well. So it's just to allow council to, the task force to have some flexibility with that, to spend when as they see that is needed. Of course, invoices will have to be kept and be given to council, and it's up to $15,000. So if there are things that are needed, we're not going back to council every minute asking for approval. You have some flexibility by way of a budget to deal with the items that are likely to arise.
Understood.
Yeah, I'm pleased. $15,000 is great for a committee to work on, I think. Watching council and knowing what councils are like, Steve, I think you should guide us in how this is written up in terms of how it will be passed.
Sure.
I think it needs some more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So what will happen is the resolutions will be passed by the board. So once this is accepted, right now we're in the discussion stage. We still have to carry forward the decision on what Alethea has proposed. But once a resolution is finally made, that information will be communicated to the town clerk and be subsequently put on an agenda for council to approve. If it is approved today, and speaking with Wade earlier this afternoon, Wade and I will then carry this information to council. We will bring this up during the council inquiries and get council to adopt basically the resolution that is being put forward by the group today. Now, normally, as you know, Ken, with council inquiries, that is a decision or at least a topic that is raised to be discussed at a later date. My understanding is that with respect to this particular issue, because it has been previously discussed, that there would be a suspension of the procedural bylaw to hear the matter that day, which is on Monday. So a decision will be made on Monday with respect to the funding. Of course, we would need the resolution from the task force as support for council.
Thank you.
Do I have any other comments, questions? Okay, so be it resolved that we will be putting forward a request for funding for up to $15,000 to Shelburne Town Council for the task force. Excellent. The next item on our agenda list, and I'm going to try and share my screen, hopefully.
Oh, sorry, I think you just had to get the all in favor.
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Okay, that's carried.
Perfect. Excellent, thank you. And okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen. In the original agenda that was shared, there is a terms of reference for the task force that we will need to have approved. I have since updated it, so I'm going to share my screen with you right now. and hopefully you can see. Can everyone see my screen? It's a Word document.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if you could increase the font maybe a little bit. Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. So where it shows for task force review, this is essentially the preview to what the content that we're asking to be approved for. This information will be shared on the town website, as well as any printing material, newspapers, etc., that will be going out to talk about the task force and or mandate. So it's on my screen, I'll read it aloud as well. The government has a responsibility to ensure that its citizens are treated fairly, with dignity and respect under the law. The government should also ensure that everyone, regardless of race, religion, or financial means, has equal access to life opportunities without any strategically imposed barriers designed to benefit one group over another. This obligation requires government at all levels to take meaningful action now to address the inequitable outcomes of Black people and other marginalized groups faced in our community. The terms of reference is essentially from the bylaws that the town of Shelburne has, and it says a task force or working group means a body of limited duration established and appointed by council through terms of reference to produce recommendations for council's consideration. 51.0 states internal committees, advisory committees, or task forces. 51.1, council may create, appoint, and dissolve any committee or task force by bylaw, including terms of reference. Where no specific rules of procedure are specified, these rules of procedures shall apply. 51.2, all meetings of committees shall generally be held in the council chambers at 203 Main Street East, but may be moved to alternate locations on the recommendation of the chair. Where an alternate location is required, it shall be at a venue which is accessible to the public. 51.3, agendas, locations, dates, and times for each committee meeting shall be posted 1 week in advance of the meeting and shall be provided to the clerk. Minutes for committee meetings shall be taken in accordance with the Municipal Act and shall be distributed to the clerk for inclusion on the council agenda on the consent agenda. The mandate simply states, the Anti-Black Racism and Discrimination Task Force was created following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the subsequent Black Lives Matter protests in Shelburne and around the globe. The world demanding police reform and the end to racism and systemic discrimination. The mandate is to bring together experts, community stakeholders, the public, and elected officials to come up with ways to address anti-Black racism and systemic racism in our community, and recommend to council a blueprint that will ensure that our community will be safe, inclusive, diverse, and welcoming for all. So at this point, I would like to get the task force opinion, comments. Does anyone have any objections to what we've put forward?
And I'll just add before people comment, just on the location, obviously, we're not having our meetings at Town Hall at this point in time because of the restrictions that we have. And so we will continue to hold our meetings electronically until further notice.
I wonder if it's possible to change that this obligation requires government at all levels. Sorry, let me skip ahead. Change from marginalized to racialized groups faced in our community. To Black people and other racialized groups in our community. Just change the marginalized from marginalized to racialized.
Okay. Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
I think we need to discuss openly here what this committee or what this task force is going to do, and about how wide or how narrow our approach is going to be. You know, for instance, I liked marginalized better because it covers a lot of groups who maybe feel they are discriminated against in our community. If we use racialized, it narrows it. I think we need to be very clear on what we're attempting to do. And I'll use a specific example. What are we doing about Indigenous peoples? They feel some of the same things that we're looking at here. Is that part of our mandate to include that group?
So given that example, I do like the term marginalized because it's inclusive of all groups. And I believe the objective, and Deputy Mayor Anderson, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the objective of this task force was to make sure that the community is equitable at all levels, not just, it started as a result of, you know, the protests in George Floyd and anti-Black racism, etc. But the objective is to tackle all discrimination, not just.
Right, right, and that's absolutely right, and hence the name of the task force. So one component is anti-Black racism, and then other is racism in general and how it impacts other marginalized groups. And so during this process, you know, again, I mentioned at the very beginning, we've already been contacted by a number of stakeholders, either groups, organizations that are looking forward to the opportunity to address the task force. And that could be from our LGBTQ community, plus community, our Indigenous community. These are some of the stakeholders that the task force will be hearing from. And ultimately, to your point, Ken, the idea is to then gather that information and determine the best way forward that we could ensure that our community is welcoming and equitable, as Alicia put it, for all of our groups.
It makes our work much bigger, but I think it makes it much more fruitful. Thank you.
I agree, Ken.
I'd like to speak to that. So the idea of, so for instance, Peel School Board did a piece as well. They did their own interviewing and whatnot. And the focus was on racism, which is I believe is the focus of this task force. Things came out like around concerns for Islamophobia and other concerns. And so the committee did not ignore the concerns that came out, but included them in the report. For anyone filling out the survey, if they're able to, if the questions or concerns that come to mind for them are around, you know, LGBTQ issues or issues around poverty or whatnot, they can speak to that in the report, and the document can reflect that. But the task force is on concerns for racialized communities, right? And so that's why my thought around the word racialized. That's why I'm preferring the word racialized. It's not to say that it's not to say that comments from others will be excluded. It will be captured, but and it can be captured. But committee task force is about concerns around racism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've outlined, I think, you know, what we're trying to capture. Certainly, the words will be left to the task force to determine. There are certain proposals that have been put forward. Gear articulated his rationale for racialized. Ken articulated his rationale for wanting to keep marginalized. But this is why this is on the table. Mm-hmm. And this is why, as Lethea put it, you know, sometimes we're going to agree to disagree, but ultimately a decision will be made by the task force, and then we'll move forward in that direction with one voice. So we've heard two suggestions so far with respect to the use of marginalized versus racialized. Does anybody else have any comments with respect to those words that are being proposed? Or if not, then maybe we could make a decision, I guess, at the end after we go through the document as to what finally will be there. Anybody else have any comments?
If one of the things I think is important for us to understand is that we all, the outrage we all felt in seeing George Floyd death was to say that we all acknowledge that racism is a concern and it exists. Now, racialized people, we didn't have to be told that, but it seems the rest of the world agreed that, oh yes, that's right, it does exist. And so I don't think we should shy away or not be bold in calling it out like it is, because certainly the world is not shying away.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I could assure you, Gear, and everybody else, that we're not shying away by any stretch of the imagination. One of the things, to your point, that came about as a result of Mr. Floyd, and whether it was new for some people or not, was the discussion about anti-Black racism. And the naming of this task force in part speaks to that. So we're not shying away from that hard issue, that hard topic, and the issues that need to be addressed as it pertains to that. But when you look at the rest of the name about racism and systemic racism, it also focuses on other groups that have been marginalized, that also live in our community, and are also looking to the task force to help them come up, help the community rather come up with results that are going to improve their lives. Because at the end of the day, this is a community initiative, and we're not leaving sort of anybody off the table, and we are calling it what it is. And I'm sure the recommendations at the end will call it what it needs to be called.
Understood. My last point, just as long as we understand that a lot of people will be captured in the term racialized, but I'll leave it at that.
And I think you make a very good point, Gear, but I think for the broader population, it will exclude certain individuals using that word. Maybe it's just knowledge, maybe it's just education, but I feel when we say marginalized, it captures more.
Understood.
Yeah, so with that, I think at this point, it's best to take a vote and decide how we proceed forward. Do we stick with the terms of reference and mandate as is with the words marginalized in, or do we remove it? So all in favor of keeping the word marginalized in, or sorry, I guess I should vote first. So do we have someone that will approve keeping the word marginalized in?
I approve.
So somebody just to move, you just need a mover, I guess, in a second or two to keep the word as used. And then there'll be further discussion, which we've already had. And then I guess you could take a vote on that.
I'd like to keep the word in.
Okay, so we're just asking somebody to move and then to second keeping the word marginalized as is. So are you moving, Althea?
Yes, I am.
Okay, is anybody seconding that?
I'll second it.
Okay, that's Ken. Any further discussion on the use of the word? We've already heard quite a bit from Ken and Gear. Any other further discussion before there's a vote on this?
I just want to echo what Gear just said. I think there are like, for an example, if we have a task force committee specifically addressing transit issues, then we do not ignore issues of senior population that is relying on that transit. We do take that in account as well while preparing a report on that. So the similar way, we should keep it as specific, as focused on the racialized groups. And if we come across any other kind of discrimination in the community, definitely we can work on that. We can include that on our report. But I think the primary focus should be on the racialized groups, because right now the situation is that people are negating it in our own communities. People are negating the effect or even that there is racial discrimination of any kind. So I think this is what we need to do to keep the focus on what our agenda is primarily.
Okay, that's a good point.
Any other comments?
So I would like to keep it in simply because I would want it to be inclusive of everyone. I wouldn't want anyone to feel that they were left out or their voices weren't heard. I would want them to feel that when they read something like this, they can approach us with their comments, with their feelings, and know that we will stand for them.
So as the task, as the task force, I believe we do have the opportunity to lead with the original intent that stemmed from the George Floyd incidents, and to speak to what you just said, Simran, the fact that there are individuals in the community who negate the fact that racism does exist. I think we have that obligation to be able to lead those discussions and make sure that the people that we're inviting to the table are representing the views of the community. So at the end of the day, we're going to be taking recommendations from key stakeholders. We're going to be taking experiences from community members, key stakeholders, and that information will help to shape the recommendations that we're putting forward to council, that blueprint. So at the end of the day, I don't think if we spend a lot of time focusing on whether we use racialized or marginalized, I don't think that will dictate so much what the objective of the task force will be.
So here's a suggestion that I have, and just in fairness to the group, and Gary and Simran make very, very good points. Because I mean, this matters, and messaging matters, and I get that, and I don't want to suggest that this should be taken lightly and sort of be forced to be dealt with today. And so if and we know that the chief obviously is not here. We know that Bella's not here, and the mayor is not here as well. I don't think that this needs to be rushed for the purposes of today, and maybe we just park this. We could certainly go through the rest of it and hear any other issues or concerns with respect to how it's read. But maybe it's best that when we have a full body, a full complement of everybody at the table, that we can ensure that we are certainly moving ahead in one direction and on one voice. So that would be a suggestion, but I'll leave it up to the task force to determine whether or not they want to take that opportunity to wait, or they feel that although it was just given today, that they are in a position to make a decision today.
I think it's appropriate and wise, and because there's no hurry for us to wait. We will keep in mind. I would like you to keep in mind the idea of what it means to be anti-Black. So part of that conversation is to say that when a moment is being taken to acknowledge racism against Black people, and the conversation certainly shifts to say, well, let's not make sure, let's not forget everyone else, right? That is, the irony in that is incredible, right? And so, as Alethea said, it's a point on education, but we need to understand the purpose of the task force. And please do not hear for 1 second in my voice or my concerns, a lack of concern for marginalized and other racialized groups in our community.
No, I think it's a fair comment, Gary, and I don't think anybody would take that away from your comments at all. But again, I leave it with the task force if it's best to park it, because this is obviously something that's very important, and once it's out there, it's out there. And it may appear that maybe some time should be given to the entire document and the words and the language that is used, because I think, as we all could acknowledge, words matter, and we want to make sure that we're communicating what the task force really wants to communicate to the public. So I'll leave that with the task force, Alethea, and the group. You guys could again make a decision if you feel that you have enough just looking at the document for the first time today to make a decision. Great. If not, you want to park it until you have a full complement, then that's a decision for the task force to make.
I think we should wait.
That's Cheyenne?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. So what does anyone else second that?
Sorry, to wait, all we have to do is have Althea withdraw her motion.
That's right.
If Alethea
I'll withdraw, that's fine.
If Alethea withdraws her motion, then we don't have to worry.
Alethea is the chair.
We're gonna have a problem. We're gonna have a problem with this Alethea and Althea this whole time.
One of you. I think the chair should keep her name, and the vice chair should use her second name. So.
But unfortunately, my second is Ali. So.
All right. So, sorry, Althea, did we hear a withdrawal of the initial motion?
Yes, I withdraw.
Okay. And so with that, Alethea, is the decision, it seems like the will of the task force is to park this discussion for a later time period.
Yes, I would rather get it right and get it out there.
Yeah,
I agree with that motion. Yeah, we don't get a second chance to make things right. So.
And I just want to add, this is language that has been put to the task force. Certainly not just the word marginalized, but if you or any member feels there should be additional text, there should be text that should be deleted, this is not by any means carved in stone as we just determined right now. So once you've had an opportunity to digest what is here, and please take advantage of the opportunity to come forward with any new ideas, new language that you may feel is best to be communicated to the public. Okay.
In terms of interpreting this to the council, then you could say that our terms of reference are being reviewed, formulated, whatever.
Yeah. So I would say, thanks for that, Ken. The terms of reference really is the town's terms of reference for the task force. But when it comes to the mandate and the language that's being used and being proposed right now for the mandate, that is currently under review, and that the task force will report back. Okay.
Yeah, those were kind of mixed in the document we got, but they're clearer now.
Yeah, that's and I'll take responsibility for that. It was the way that it was communicated to Alethea, but yes, the terms of reference is going to be that of the town.
So after this meeting, I will send the updated terms of reference and mandate so that everyone can take some time to review and be prepared at the next meeting to provide some feedback. If between now and the next meeting, you have comments that you want to share as well, I can start to collect that information as well. Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item. Oh, we're almost at the end. So determine the frequency of these meetings. So initially, because of how heavy this topic is, I'm thinking that we may want to meet at least for the next few months, every 2 weeks. I will need to have the task force thoughts, comments on that. Does 2 weeks seem too frequent or not enough?
I think that's perfect. Can I ask that we do it on a Thursday evening?
I am fine with the Thursday evening. Does anyone want a second moving the meetings to Thursday evenings?
Second that.
Okay, I have no mean to interject, but there is first the question of meeting bi-weekly and addressing that before we actually get to the time.
Yes.
So are you, in essence, asking for someone to move that?
Yes.
No, sorry. No, we're not. We're just, the question that was first posed was, is the task force okay meeting every 2 weeks for the next several months? So let's address that first, and then we could address the time.
So yes, I'm okay with every 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And all in favor of 2 weeks?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
I'm in favor.
Excellent. And moving the date from a Friday to Thursday. Do we have someone to move that?
I'd
I'll
like
move that.
Okay.
What time on Thursdays?
I'm fine with 6 p.m. to keep it consistent, if that works for everyone.
That works for me.
We probably could have done that all in one motion. Just the timing of the frequency rather of the meeting, the time of the meeting. We could probably just do in one motion. We don't have to do separate motions because it's all relating to the one item.
Just in discussion with the timing of the meeting, the 2 weeks is fine with me. Thursday nights aren't a good night for me, but I'll go with the will of the committee. And I think to establish that, it might be worthwhile to have a bit of a poll away from the meeting with the committee to find out what evenings are, our best. Are evenings even the best time? I know it's hard to get, what are we going to be, nine people plus 2 others, to get 9 people together, but we don't know what some of the commitments are to the people who aren't at the table tonight. So.
Fair. So
okay, so maybe that could be postponed until the next meeting. And I guess to Ken's point, Alethea, maybe if you could just maybe send out correspondence to the group between now and I guess the next meeting, whenever that's going to be established, with respect to the timing. We already have confirmed meeting bi-weekly is fine, but the day and the time, maybe sending that out.
okay.
but I guess just for my understanding and for everybody else, so the next meeting is going to be in 2 weeks, and it's going to be on what day and what time?
I think that's to be determined based on the polling.
Right. Okay.
Agreed.
All right. That sounds all right. All right. Go
So
ahead.
yeah, we'll leave it as tentatively for Thursday, time to be determined.
There we go. Okay. Perfect. All right.
So, Alethea, just a suggestion, maybe if after this meeting and we give everyone a deadline to respond by next week, Wednesday, how does that work?
That's fair. I was actually going to see if I can do the poll that Ken suggested, but we can touch
Yeah.
base offline and coordinate that.
Perfect.
Okay, so this brings us to pretty much the close of our meeting. I guess at this point I can turn it over to the task force for any questions, any burning topics that we want to have addressed before we close. I know it was.
I don't have a.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Okay.
I'd like to say that I am very, very, very glad and happy to be working with all of you on this task force. I know it's something that's of importance to all of us. That's obviously why we're here. So I'm looking forward to this.
Perfect. Thank you. And Cheyenne, do you have any comments? I know this is your first meeting, first exposure to the GRU.
Yeah, I'm just kind of taking it all in, but I'm excited to take part.
Excellent. Glad to have you on board.
Thanks.
I too am very glad to meet other members of the community. For some reason, I'm looking forward to meeting Bella. I keep seeing her comments on Facebook, and now she's not here. So, yeah, absolutely nice to be working with all of you. And I think Soha might not be here, I'm guessing, perhaps because of Friday night prayers or if there's any Friday night gathering.
Yes.
So Friday nights may not work for her, and probably shouldn't work for me either, but we're still early enough in the evening.
Okay. And Ken, any
I would
closing
just
comments?
comment, I've during the past few months, a lot of my activities in life have gone from real meetings with people and shaking hands, even giving a hug sometimes, to moving virtual meetings. And it's been a strange event. It has been somewhat successful in my life because the people that I went from the real meetings to the virtual meetings with, I knew and had other connections. I've never started anything in this virtual way. And I think be interesting to get to know each other and find a way to do that virtually, because I know a few of you, but a few of you I know nothing about other than I've seen your names. So I think in our upcoming meetings, some way to get a handle on each of us and what we believe in and where we're going and what we've done might be quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. I'll definitely put that as an agenda item for us to just do a quick bio of who we are and
send us out a pithy question that we have to give an answer to. So.
And Simran, any closing comments?
I need to start commenting more on the Shelburne pages so people look forward to talking to me as well.
Well, actually, for secretarial purposes, Simran, I saw your name as Simran in the announcement, but on this thing it says
it says my husband's name. I didn't realize I'm using his laptop.
Okay, so if you could spell your first and last name for me, please.
Yeah, Simran. That's the first name. And last name is B as in boy, BHA, M as in Mike, U, BHAMU.
Perfect.
So I just wanted to comment on something that that popped in my head after Steve went over some of the tasks that that we would be achieving. And you mentioned that you would be doing some surveys and things like that. So I'm not too sure if you are aware. We do have a company on the side that does business consulting. So I would like to offer to volunteer any kind of report writing or research based off of those surveys if you would want. So I would like to offer that.
Yeah, that's for the task force to consider. But I thank you for putting that out there. And once we bring, hopefully, Carol into the equation, we'll see what the opportunities are like. But I thank you for that, Simran.
Sure. So in case like they are pressed in time, if there's an issue with the human resources or whatever, then I would be able to help out wherever they need help.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to confirm who I have present, Alethea Stevenson and Althea Casamento, Steve Anderson, Ken Toppin, Cheyenne. I'll get your last name from the Facebook, Cheyenne. Myself, Simran, and absent were Soha, Bella, and Chief Moore, and Wade.
And Wade, yes.
Okay, perfect.
That's it.
Thank you.
Perfect. And Deputy Mayor Anderson, any closing comments?
No, I think it's all been said already, and I just echoed the sentiments that have been said already. That I look forward to working with everybody.
Perfect. And as the chair, my final comments, I'm excited to be working with everyone, and it's the first time I'm meeting many of you. Ken, I think this is my first meeting with you, so definitely looking forward to the days ahead, weeks ahead, and some great learnings. We will definitely have some great learnings, and I'm sure we will have some very uncomfortable moments, but together as a group, I'm hopeful and optimistic that we will be able to move past those uncomfortable moments to periods of growth and great things for our community. Cheyenne, again, welcome to the task force, and I'm really looking forward to accomplishing some great things together. So thank you everyone for stepping up and saying yes to being part of the task force, and great things ahead. So until next meeting, everyone, I will call it a night, and we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Have a
evening.
great
Good night,
night.
folks.
All right, take care.